Hello, and welcome to SleepTide. I'm glad you found your way here tonight, wherever you're listening from, whatever kind of day you're leaving behind. This moment doesn't ask anything from you. You don't need to arrive prepared, focused, or alert. You can simply be here, exactly as you are, and allow everything else to soften. You may be coming to this space after a long day, or perhaps after a long stretch of thinking that didn't quite turn itself off. Maybe your body feels ready to rest while your mind is still carrying quiet echoes of the day. That's all right. Nothing needs to be resolved before sleep begins. There is no requirement to settle everything first. For now, you can let your attention rest lightly on the surface beneath you. Notice how it holds you without effort. Your weight doesn't need to be balanced or adjusted. Gravity is already doing that work for you, quietly and reliably, without asking for your awareness. Your shoulders can loosen, your jaw can unclench, the muscles around your eyes can soften, as if they no longer need to watch for anything. You don't need to listen closely. You don't need to follow every word. The sound of the voice can exist gently in the background, like distant water moving somewhere beyond the walls. You are free to drift in and out of attention. Nothing important will be missed. Breathing can remain exactly as it is. There is no need to deepen it or slow it down intentionally. Each breath arrives on its own and leaves on its own, steady and unforced. Your body already knows how to move toward rest without instruction. Tonight, we'll be drifting far from the present moment, but without traveling anywhere at all. We'll move gently through ancient places and distant times, not to analyze them, not to study them, but to let their quiet scale and slowness create space for rest. Civilizations long settled into silence, wonders remembered more by feeling than by detail. Landscapes shaped by time rather than urgency. You don't need to picture anything clearly. You can let images remain soft and incomplete, like outlines seen through mist. If a thought forms, it can pass. If an image fades, that's fine too. This is not a story you need to keep track of. It is an atmosphere you can rest inside. There is nothing to prepare for and nothing to anticipate. The journey ahead is slow, unhurried and patient. It does not move toward a climax or a conclusion. It simply continues, gently, allowing your awareness to loosen a little more with each passing moment. For now, you can allow the world outside this space to recede. Sounds can fade into the distance. The day can release its hold. The night does not demand attention. It offers permission. You are safe to rest here. You are allowed to let go, and there is no need to stay awake. Babylon existed in a time so distant that it no longer presses against the present. It does not compete with modern places. It does not ask to be compared, measured, or judged. It rests far back along the long river of human memory, softened by centuries of silence, its edges worn smooth by time. You don't need to know exactly when Babylon stood, or how many generations passed beneath its walls. Numbers are not important here. What matters is the feeling of distance, the sense that this place belongs to a world that moved more slowly, where nights were darker, skies were wider, and human life followed rhythms shaped by seasons, rivers, and stone. Babylon rose along the banks of the Euphrates, a river that flowed steadily through flat, open land. The river did not hurry. It moved with patience, returning year after year, flooding gently, withdrawing quietly. Life gathered around it not because it demanded attention, but because it offered continuity. Water, soil, growth, return. The same cycle repeating long before names were written and long after they were forgotten. The city itself did not begin as a wonder. It grew gradually, layer by layer, brick by brick. Walls were raised slowly. Streets formed from repeated footsteps. Buildings settled into place through use, not design. Nothing appeared suddenly. Everything accumulated. Time did the shaping. When you imagine Babylon now, you don't need sharp images. You can let the city remain indistinct, like something glimpsed through heat and distance. Low sun, dust in the air, the quiet weight of stone warmed by the day and cooling slowly as night approaches. Sounds are muted here, softened by open space and thick walls. Babylon was surrounded by vast sky, without electric light, without constant noise. The night would have arrived fully. Darkness would have spread evenly across the land. Stars would have appeared clearly, one by one, until the sky felt almost crowded with light. The same stars, moving slowly overhead, night after night, year after year, unchanged. People living here oriented themselves not by clocks, but by patterns. The rising of the sun, the lengthening of shadows, the movement of water. Time did not rush forward. It circled, returned, repeated. Life unfolded at a pace that allowed attention to soften naturally. The city was known for its walls, its gates, its scale. But scale here does not mean spectacle. It means presence. Thick walls that absorbed heat during the day and released it slowly at night. Pathways worn smooth by use. Structures built to last, not to impress. Even the idea of the hanging gardens arrives to us, not as certainty, but as suggestion. A memory passed through time, reshaped by retelling, softened by doubt. A place that may have existed as much in imagination as in stone. And that uncertainty makes it quieter, not louder. It allows the gardens to remain suspended, undefined, resting somewhere between reality and memory. In this orientation, Babylon is not a destination, it is a distance. A quiet separation from the pace of modern life. A reminder that entire worlds once existed without urgency, without constant stimulation, without the need to move quickly from one moment to the next. You do not need to hold on to details. You do not need to remember names, rulers, or events. This place does not require knowledge. It offers atmosphere, dry air, slow evenings, long nights, stone, water, earth, and sky arranged into a rhythm that no longer exists, but still leaves a trace. As you listen, you may notice that your own sense of time begins to loosen slightly. The present moment stretches, the day feels further away. Babylon does not pull you into activity. It gently removes you from immediacy, creating space where nothing needs to happen. This is not a story you must follow. It is a setting you can rest inside. A landscape already quiet by the time you arrive. Already settled, already complete. And from air without effort, without transition, we can begin to drift more deeply into what remains. The ancient wonders not as achievements, but as stillness shaped by time. Stone, water, and silence arranged into forms that no longer need to stand. In ancient Babylon, movement did not announce itself. It did not call attention or demand response. Motion unfolded quietly, guided by repetition rather than intention, shaped by gravity, water, and habit. Nothing here needed to be fast in order to function. Everything moved only as much as it needed to, and no more. The river flowed first. Long before walls rose or paths were worn into the earth, the Euphrates was already moving, carrying water from distant lands, returning again and again to the same wide bends. Its flow was steady, patient, and reliable, not a rushing current, but a broad, deliberate movement that allowed life to gather rather than scatter. Water moved because land allowed it to. Gravity guided it gently downward, never forcing, never pulling sharply. The river widened where the land softened, narrowed where stone held firm. It responded slowly to seasons far away, to rains that fell beyond sight, to meltwaters that arrived long after their origin was forgotten. Nothing in the river's movement was immediate. Everything was delayed, softened, distributed across time. Along its banks, the rhythm repeated. Water arrived, soil absorbed, plants grew. Heat lifted moisture into the air. Night returned it gently to the ground. The same cycle continued, not as an event, but as a condition. There was no beginning to mark, and no ending to wait for. Only continuation. Babylon grew inside this rhythm. The city did not impose itself on the river. It adjusted to it. Streets followed the land. Walls rose where the ground allowed stability. Buildings accumulated slowly, brick by brick, shaped by use rather than urgency. No single moment defined the city's form. It emerged gradually, almost invisibly, through repeated motion. Within the city, movement layered itself quietly. Footsteps traced the same paths day after day, wearing the ground smooth without intention. Animals moved with familiarity rather than haste. Doors opened and closed without echo, traveling far, absorbed by thick walls and open air. Sound rarely carried sharply. The city held it gently, letting it dissolve. Stone participated in this slow motion as much as water did. During the day, walls absorbed heat from the sun, warming gradually. At night, they released that warmth slowly back into the air. This exchange did not happen quickly enough to notice. Moment by moment, it unfolded over hours, stretching time until temperature changes felt like atmosphere rather than action. If the hanging gardens existed, they would have followed this same principle, not rising suddenly, not demanding attention, but arranged in layers that encouraged gradual movement upward and downward. Terraces stacked gently, each one holding soil, water, and plant life in balance. Steps worn smooth not by design, but by repetition. Water would have been lifted patiently, not in bursts, but in steady cycles. Containers rising and falling, channels guiding flow from one level to the next. The same paths used again and again, until they became background rather than feature. The sound of water would not have dominated the space. It would have blended, becoming part of the city's constant tone. Plants in such gardens would not have rushed to grow. Leaves would unfold gradually. Roots would spread invisibly, anchoring themselves slowly into soil held by stone. Growth would have been continuous but subtle, noticeable only across long spans of time. Nothing dramatic, nothing sudden, just persistence. This kind of environment trains the mind to release urgency. When movement repeats without variation, attention no longer needs to track it. Awareness loosens its grip. The nervous system recognizes predictability as safety. There is nothing here that requires reaction. Even light moved slowly in Babylon. Without artificial brightness, daylight shifted gradually across walls and ground. Shadows lengthened without urgency. Evening did not arrive abruptly. It settled. Colors softened. Activity thinned naturally, guided by fading light rather than decision. Night did not silence the city instantly. Its softened Italiano sounds reduced themselves. Movement became sparse. The darkness spread evenly, uninterrupted, allowing stars to emerge clearly overhead. The sky became a slow-moving presence, patterns shifting almost imperceptibly across hours. Stars did not rush across the sky. Their motion was too slow to follow. Night after night, they returned to familiar positions, reinforcing continuity rather than change. The sky did not mark time loudly. It allowed time to pass quietly. In this setting, time felt wide. Waiting did not feel like delay, it felt normal. The absence of urgency did not signal lack. It signaled balance. Life unfolded at a pace that allowed attention to soften without effort. As you listen now, you may notice that this same quality of motion begins to echo in your own body. Breathing continues without instruction. Muscles release tension where it is no longer needed. There is no need to anticipate what comes next. The rhythm is already established. You do not need to hold a clear image of Babylon. You can let the idea blur into motion itself. Flow in water, cooling stone, repeating cycles of day and night, all of it moving just enough to continue, never enough to disturb rest. Slow motion here does not mean stillness. It means balance sustained over time, movement that does not require response, change that unfolds without calling attention to itself. Babylon existed inside this rhythm for centuries, and now, as memory rather than place, it offers that rhythm again, not as history to follow, but as atmosphere to rest within. A pace slow enough for the body to trust, a flow gentle enough for the mind to stop reaching. Nothing here is moving toward a conclusion. Nothing is building toward an event. Motion continues because it always has. And as awareness softens further, even that sense of motion can fade into the background, leaving only continuities, repetition, and rest. Everything is already moving on its own. Babylon did not stand because it tried to. It stood because it rested on things that did not need to be seen. Beneath every wall, every terrace, every pathway worn smooth by time, there was earth doing its quiet work, soil compressed under weight. Clay settled, stone pressed downward and was received without resistance. Support here was not dramatic, it was constant. The foundations of the city were not meant to be admired. They were buried, hidden from view, existing only to hold everything else in place. Layer upon layer of packed earth, brick and stone absorbed weight slowly, distributing it outward and downward. Nothing strained, nothing protested. The ground accepted what was placed upon it and remained steady. This kind of support does not announce itself. You only notice it when it fails. And here, for centuries, it did not. Walls remained upright. Terraces held soil and water. Pathways stayed level enough for repeated use. The city trusted the ground beneath it without needing to think about that trust. The land itself had been shaped long before Babylon arrived. Rivers deposited sediment gradually, smoothing and flattening the plain. Floods spread silt evenly and withdrew again. Time compressed these layers, pressing softness into what once flowed became stable. What once shifted became reliable. Nothing rushed this process. No one directed it. The ground became supportive simply by existing under pressure for long enough. Weight arrived slowly. Time did the rest. The hanging gardens, if they existed, would have depended entirely on this unseen stability. Terraces filled with soil and water could only remain balanced if what lay beneath them was calm and strong. Stone columns carried weight downward. Foundations spread that weight outward. Everything relied on forces that worked quietly, without attention. Water pressed downward as well. It soaked into soil. It flowed through channels. It rested briefly before moving on. Even water trusted the ground to receive it. Absorption and release happened naturally, without control. Guided by gravity and structure rather than effort, the city did not float. It did not hover. It rested. Every structure leaned gently into the earth, confident that it would be held. This resting posture allowed height without fear. Walls could rise. Terraces could stack. Weight could accumulate without urgency. At night, when movement slowed further, this sense of support would have been even more present. The city grew quiet. Activity thinned. The ground remained unchanged. Beneath sleeping bodies, beneath cooling stone, beneath the darkened terraces, the earth continued to hold everything evenly. There was no need to check that it would, no need to monitor stability. Support did not fluctuate from moment to moment. It existed as a constant condition, allowing attention to release completely. Even now, as Babylon exists only as memory and ruin, that same support remains. The ground still holds what is left. Foundations still rest beneath fragments of wall. Earth continues to do what it has always done, receiving weight, absorbing pressure, remaining steady. This kind of unseen support is deeply calming. It removes the need for vigilance. When you know something is holding you without effort, the body naturally lets go of tension. Muscles stop bracing. Breath deepens without instruction. As you rest now, your own body is supported in much the same way. The surface beneath you accepts your weight without asking anything in return. It does not shift suddenly. It does not require balance or adjustment. You are already held. You do not need to think about how this support works. You do not need to monitor it. Just like the ground beneath Babylon, it is reliable enough to be forgotten. Even your internal systems work this way. Bones carry weight quietly. Muscles maintain posture without conscious control. Circulation continues steadily. None of this demands attention. Support happens beneath awareness. Babylon trusted the unseen for centuries. It did not build its life around constant checking. It allowed weight to exist. It allowed rest to happen naturally. You can do the same now. You do not need to hold yourself alert. You do not need to prepare for movement. You can allow yourself to rest fully into what is already supporting you. Nothing beneath you is in a hurry. Nothing is shifting unpredictably. Support remains even, patient, and present. The city rested. The earth held. Time passed, and as awareness continues to soften, you can let yourself sink a little deeper into this same sense of being held, allowing tension to drain away naturally, knowing that nothing is required of you, and nothing needs to be managed. Everything is already supported. In Babylon, nothing truly began from nothing, and nothing ever fully disappeared. Everything that seemed to arrive had already been forming quietly for a long time, and everything that faded simply returned to a wider cycle that did not require memory or record. Growth did not announce itself as creation, and decline did not arrive as loss. Both were part of the same slow movement repeating endlessly beneath the surface of daily life. The river carried this cycle first. Water arrived from far away, already shaped by lands unseen, already carrying traces of soil, minerals, and time. When it reached the city, it did not stop. It spread, soaked, nourished, and then withdrew again, leaving behind what was needed for growth. Fields, darkened with moisture soil softened. Seeds responded quietly, swelling and opening beneath the surface, long before anything visible appeared. Plants did not rise suddenly. They emerged slowly, almost invisibly, responding to conditions rather than commands. Roots extended downward, feeling their way through earth held by stone. Stems followed light patiently. Leaves unfolded not all at once, but in stages so subtle that growth could only be noticed by returning again and again to the same place. Life here did not hurry to be seen. If the hanging gardens existed, they would have embodied this same rhythm. Layers of soil resting on stone terraces, Water guided gently upward and allowed to return downward again, repeating the same journey without variation. Plants would have grown in this suspended space, neither fully natural nor fully artificial, existing in balance between effort and release. Nothing forced, nothing wasted. Water flowed through channels worn smooth by repetition, not carved sharply in a single moment. It followed paths that had proven themselves reliable over time. When water passed through soil, it carried nourishment downward, and when it evaporated, it returned upward into air, only to fall again later as distant rain. This circulation did not belong to one place or one moment. It belonged to the cycle itself. Growth depended on return. Leaves fell, stems dried, roots decayed back into soil. What once stood upright, softened, collapsed, and blended back into the earth that had supported it. Nothing was removed completely. Material shifted form, redistributed itself, and became available again. The gardens did not need to be cleared aggressively. Time handled that work gently. Even stone participated in this cycle, though more slowly. Bricks weathered, edges softened, surfaces eroded grain by grain under wind and water. What seemed permanent gradually changed without resistance. The city aged not through collapse, but through quiet transformation, its materials slowly returning to the land from which they had come. This rhythm of birth and return did not require observation. It continued whether anyone watched or not. Fields grew whether they were admired. Water flowed whether it was noticed. Decay happened without ceremony. The cycle did not pause to explain itself. It simply continued. Living within this rhythm changes how time is felt. When everything returns, there is no urgency to hold on. When growth is slow and predictable, there is no anxiety about missing a moment. Life unfolds not as a sequence of achievements, but as participation in a larger movement that carries everything gently forward and back again. As you rest now, this same rhythm is present within your own body. Cells are replaced quietly. Energy is used and restored. Breath enters and leaves. Nothing needs to be forced. Nothing needs to be held. Processes unfold without instruction, guided by patterns far older than conscious thought. You do not need to imagine guardians clearly. You can let the idea soften into sensation, the feeling of growth without pressure, the comfort of return without loss, the reassurance that nothing important disappears. It only changes form and finds its way back into a wider flow. Babylon lived within this cycle for generations. And now, as memory rather than city, it still carries this rhythm, not as history, but as atmosphere. A reminder that beginnings do not require effort, and endings do not require fear. Everything that rises will settle. Everything that settles will nourish what comes next. And as awareness continues to soften, you can allow yourself to rest inside this endless exchange, where nothing needs to be finished, and nothing needs to be saved, because everything is already part of a return that never stops. Time in Babylon did not move in straight lines. It did not advance as a list of moments to be completed or events to be reached. It spread outward, wide and patient, layering itself so slowly that change became almost invisible. Days followed nights. Seasons followed one another. Generations arrived and faded, not as chapters, but as gradual shifts in presence. What felt permanent was simply movement happening at a pace too slow to interrupt rest. The city existed within this deep time without needing to define it. There were no clocks measuring progress, no sharp divisions separating one moment from the next. Time was felt through repetition rather than precision. The return of water, the softening of heat into evening, the reappearance of stars in familiar patterns. These signals did not demand attention. They reassured through consistency. Stone walls that seemed unmoving were slowly changing all along. Bricks warmed and cooled thousands of times. Surfaces weathered grain by grain. Mortar loosened, tightened, loosened again. These changes did not accumulate quickly enough to notice. They belonged to deep time, where motion is measured not in minutes, but in patience. The gardens, if they existed, would have been shaped entirely by this duration. Plants lived out their full cycles without urgency. Leaves appeared, deepened in color, thinned, and returned to the soil. Roots thickened and softened. Soil shifted slowly as water passed through it again and again. Nothing here happened quickly enough to create anxiety. Everything had time to become what it was becoming. Deep time removes pressure by removing comparison. When change unfolds slowly, there is no need to keep up. No need to remember exactly how things were before. The present moment stretches wide enough to hold everything that matters without crowding. Life becomes something you are inside of, rather than something moving past you. Babylon remained in this state for centuries, not frozen, not static, but continuously becoming itself in small, nearly invisible ways. The city you might imagine at one moment was never exactly the same as the city of the moment before it, and yet it felt the same. Familiar, grounded, complete. This is the nature of deep time. It allows difference without disruption. It absorbs change so thoroughly that continuity remains intact. What shifts does not announce itself as loss or gain. It simply blends. As you rest now, this sense of duration can begin to replace the sharper edges of time you may be used to. There is no need to track how long you have been listening. No need to anticipate what comes next. The mind can loosen its grip on sequence and allow itself to remain suspended in the present without effort. Your body already understands this kind of time. While you sleep, hours pass without awareness. Processes continue quietly. Healing unfolds. Memory reorganizes itself. Time moves forward without needing supervision. Deep time is not something you enter. It is something that holds you when attention relaxes. The river flowed within deep time as well. Its course shifted slowly over generations. Banks eroded, channels adjusted. Floods reshaped land gently and withdrew again. No single flood defined the river's history. No single moment marked its change. The river became what it was through countless repetitions spread across centuries. Human life fit into this scale without conflict. People did not expect permanence from individual moments. They lived within cycles that extended beyond their own lifetimes. What they built knowing it would weather. What they planted knowing it would return to soil. Deep time, soft attachment without removing meaning. As awareness continues to soften now, even the idea of ancient can begin to lose its sharpness. Babylon does not sit at a distant point on a timeline. It exists as a texture of time, a thickness of duration that you can rest within. Past and present blend. Distance dissolves. Nothing in deep time is urgent. Nothing is behind schedule. Nothing is arriving late. Change unfolds when conditions allow it, not when attention demands it. This removes the need for vigilance. The body recognizes this spaciousness and responds by releasing tension naturally. Breathing remains steady. Muscles soften further. Thoughts lose their urgency and begin to thin. The mind does not need to hold on to sequence or memory. It can drift within duration without effort. Deep time does not end. It does not lead toward a conclusion. It continues, wide and patient, absorbing everything that passes through it. Babylon rested within it. The river rested within it. Stone, water, plant, and sky all moved inside the same slow envelope of duration. And now, as you rest, you are held within this same deep time. Nothing needs to be measured. Nothing needs to be completed. There is only continuation, gentle and uninterrupted, allowing awareness to sink further into stillness, supported by a sense of time so wide that it no longer presses against you at all. The future of Babylon did not arrive as a single moment. It did not come with an ending announced or a line drawn between what was and what would be. It unfolded quietly, gradually, in the same way everything else in this place unfolded, through slow shifts, gentle redistribution, and the patient work of time moving forward without urgency. What lay ahead was never a destination waiting to be reached. It was simply more time, wide and unhurried, continuing on. Long after the city no longer functioned as it once had, the land remained. The river continued to move along its course, adjusting slowly to changes in terrain, weather, and season. Water did not remember the city. It did not resist flowing where walls once stood. It moved where gravity allowed it, spreading and withdrawing with the same calm repetition it always had. The future belonged to the river just as much as the past had. Stone structures did not fall all at once. Soft and edges rounded, surfaces weathered. Brick loosened from brick. What seemed solid gradually became porous to wind, rain, and heat. This process did not hurry. It did not erase. It transformed. The city did not vanish. It redistributed itself into the land that had always held it. Plants returned where stone once dominated. Seeds, carried by wind and water, settled into cracks and softened surfaces. Roots found purchase slowly, widening spaces over time. Growth did not reclaim the city aggressively. It arrived gently, filling what was available, responding to conditions rather than intention. The future was not a reversal. It was a continuation of the same cycle, expressed in different forms. The hanging gardens, if they existed, would not have ended suddenly either. Soil would have dried and moistened again. Plants would have completed their cycles. Leaves would have fallen, stems would have weakened, and everything would have returned gradually to the earth that supported it. Nothing dramatic, nothing final, just the quiet completion of one phase and the beginning of another, stretched across generations. The far future does not hurry to arrive, because nothing needs to be resolved. There is no moment where everything changes at once. Instead, small changes accumulate gently until the shape of things is different enough to notice. And even then, the difference does not feel abrupt. It feels natural, expected. Come. In this way, the future removes pressure rather than adding it. When change unfolds slowly, there is no need to prepare, no need to anticipate. The body does not need to brace for what comes next. It can remain at rest while time continues on its own. As you rest now, you can allow the idea of the future to soften in the same way. You do not need to imagine what comes next. You do not need to think ahead. The future does not require your attention in order to unfold. It will arrive whether it is considered or ignored. Even on the scale of centuries, nothing in Babylon's future demanded urgency. The land absorbed what remained. The river continued its path. The sky followed its patterns. The stars returned night after night, unchanged by what happened below. Time extended forward without concern. This kind of future is deeply calming because it does not present itself as a problem to solve. It is not a challenge. It is simply more duration, more continuity, more space for things to shift at their own pace. The absence of urgency allows the nervous system to remain settled. You may notice now that thoughts about tomorrow or later begin to lose their grip. They do not need to be followed. They do not need to be finished. The future is not pulling at you. It is not calling for action. It is simply there, wide and patient, waiting without expectation. Babylon did not need to know its future in order to exist fully in its present. It moved within time without forecasting its own transformation. And when change came, it arrived gradually enough to feel like rest rather than disruption. You are allowed the same ease. You do not need to prepare for what comes next. You do not need to plan your way forward. Time will continue regardless, carrying things gently along its path. Nothing important depends on your vigilance. As awareness continues to soften, even the idea of later can begin to dissolve. The mind no longer needs to project itself forward. It can remain where it is, or drift away entirely. Sleep does not require anticipation. It arrives when thought releases its hold. The far future stretches outward, quiet and unremarkable, holding no sudden turns, no sharp endings, only continuation. And as this sense of unpressured time settles, you can rest more deeply now, knowing that nothing is waiting to be handled, nothing is approaching that requires readiness, and everything will continue gently on its own. In Babylon, belonging was never something that needed to be declared or defended. It was not an identity to hold or a position to protect. It existed quietly, as a natural result of remaining long enough in one place for the boundaries between self and environment to soften. The city did not ask those who lived within it to feel separate from stone, water, or sky. Over time, separation simply became unnecessary. Belonging grew from repetition, walking the same paths, hearing the same sounds at different hours of the day, feeling the temperature of stone change beneath the sun and cool again after dusk. These experiences did not stand out individually. Together, they formed a background of familiarity that allowed the body to relax without explanation. When nothing feels foreign, vigilance fades on its own. The land held the city, and the city rested into the land. This relationship did not require awareness. It existed as a condition rather than a thought. Walls leaned into earth. Foundations settled deeper with time. Even as structures aged, they remained part of the same ground that had always supported them. There was no sharp line between what belonged and what did not. Water moved through the city in the same way. It flowed where channels guided it, soaked into soil, evaporated, and returned again later. It did not belong to the city, and yet the city existed because of it. This mutual presence did not need ownership or control. It worked because it was shared. If the hanging gardens existed, they would have embodied belonging through balance rather than dominance. Plants did not conquer stone. Stone did not restrain growth. Both adjusted to each other slowly, allowing space where needed, offering support where required. The gardens would not have felt imposed, they would have felt settled. In such a place, even time belonged. Days did not rush forward. Nights did not interrupt. Time flowed through the city the way water flowed through soil, nourishing, shaping, and moving on without resistance. People lived within it rather than against it. Life did not feel like something happening elsewhere. It happened here, continuously. As awareness softens now, this sense of belonging can begin to shift inward. You do not need to place yourself inside Babylon clearly. You do not need to imagine walls or gardens in detail. You can let the idea of place dissolve into the feeling of being held, supported, and unchallenged. Your body already understands belonging. It knows how to rest into a surface. It knows how to release tension when nothing threatens it. It recognizes when it does not need to watch or prepare. In those moments, the sense of being somewhere fades, replaced by the simpler experience of being. Even breath participates in this belonging. Air enters without invitation, leaves without effort. The body does not need to ask permission to breathe. It belongs to the environment that sustains it, and that environment responds naturally. Belonging removes the need to orient yourself. There is no need to locate where you are or what time it is. There is no need to distinguish between inner and outer experience. Sound, sensation, and thought soften into a single field where nothing stands apart. Babylon belonged to its land, not because it claimed it, but because it remained long enough for separation to lose meaning. And now, as memory rather than city, it offers that same sense of quiet inclusion. You are not visiting. You are not observing. You are simply present within a continuity that does not require definition. As this sense of belonging deepens, the mind naturally loosens its hold. Thoughts slow, not because they are stopped, but because they are no longer needed to maintain orientation. Awareness drifts, the boundary between listening and resting. You do not need to hold on to the idea of belonging. You can let it exist without effort, the way the ground holds weight without noticing it. There is no task here, no role to perform, no identity to maintain. Everything that is here already accepts you. The surface beneath you, the air around you, the quiet rhythm of your own body. Nothing requires adjustment. Nothing needs to be improved. Belonging, in its deepest form, is not about connection. It is about the absence of separation. And as that absence becomes more familiar, you can allow yourself to rest more fully now, no longer needing to locate yourself anywhere at all. There comes a point where even memory no longer needs to remain intact, not because it is erased, but because it is no longer required to hold anything together. Babylon, at this distance, is no longer a city, no longer a place with edges or structures. It becomes an atmosphere, a weightless presence, something that lingers without form, like warmth in stone, long after the sun is set. Nothing needs to be pictured clearly anymore. Images can blur. Names can fade. What matters now is not what remains distinct, but what remains gentle. The sense of continuity does not depend on detail. It depends only on softness, on the absence of urgency, on the quiet permission to stop following anything at all. Time no longer stretches forward or backward. It loosens. It spreads thin until direction stops making sense. There is no earlier and no later that needs to be tracked. The idea of duration becomes vague, like drifting in water where depth no longer matters. Everything that was moving slowly can now move less, until even movement becomes unnecessary to notice. Stone cools completely. Water settles into stillness. Air rests without shifting. Even the idea of ground becomes abstract, replaced by the simple experience of being supported without sensation. Nothing presses, nothing pulls. The body does not need to respond to anything. It is already where it needs to be. Thoughts, if they appear, do not need to be followed. They can pass through without forming sequences, without attaching to meaning. Words lose their edges. Sentences no longer point anywhere. Language becomes a soft texture rather than a guide, something that exists briefly and then dissolves on its own. Babylon dissolves this way too, not as collapse, not as disappearance, but as diffusion. What was once gathered spreads evenly into the land, into memory, into time so wide that it no longer needs to be named. There is no loss here, only redistribution, only quiet return. Breathing continues without attention. The body no longer checks its position. Muscles release whatever tension remains, not all at once, but gradually, in waves so subtle they barely register. Awareness thins, like mist lifting without direction, leaving behind a calm that does not need to be described. There is no need to stay awake for what comes next. Nothing important depends on listening. nothing will be missed. The words are no longer carrying information. They're only accompanying the natural descent into rest, fading as they go. Even the sense of self becomes less defined, not gone, just unimportant. The boundary between inside and outside softens until it no longer matters which is which. Sensation floats without ownership. Sound exists without location. Silence grows wider. This is not an ending. It is not a transition. It is simply the point where continuation no longer requires awareness. Everything that needed to be said has already settled. Everything that needed to move has already slowed. Babylon rests. Time rests. You rest. And as language thins further, it becomes easier to let go completely, allowing sleep to arrive, not as an action, but as a natural state that was already waiting beneath attention. Nothing more is required.